it's so awful for your mental health because you're just trying to basically survive some days. So I think people don't understand the mental exhaustion and toll that it takes to just get up and be a part of the world.
Welcome to the Radical Health Rebel podcast. I'm your host, Lee Brandon. This work started for me several decades ago when I started to see the impact I could make on people, helping them to identify the root cause of their health problems that no doctor could figure out, including serious back, knee, shoulder and neck injuries, acne and eczema issues, severe gut health problems, even helping couples get pregnant after several IVF treatments had failed. And it really moves me to be able to help people in this way. And that is why I do what I do and why we have this show. This week, I'm thrilled to bring you a powerful and eye-opening conversation with the amazing Briana Banos, a talented documentary maker and passionate advocate for TSW, which stands for Topical Steroid Withdrawal. We're diving into the devastating impacts of this iatrogenic condition caused by the overuse or overprescription of topical steroids, often given for atopic dermatitis or eczema. As someone who dealt with eczema myself in my early 20s and briefly used topical steroids, I'm fortunate that I never suffered myself. In addition, I've had friends and family members struggle with eczema and even TSW itself. So when I came across Briana's first documentary, Preventable, on social media, I knew I had to learn more. The documentary lays bare the seriousness of TSW and shines a light on a heartbreaking reality that many sufferers are gaslit by the very healthcare professionals who prescribe these treatments in the first place. Left without support, they're forced to navigate lives filled with pain, frustration, and despair, often feeling like their condition isn't taken seriously. Since recording this episode, I've also watched Briana's follow-up documentary, Still Preventable, which is equally, if not more powerful than the original. Both films are deeply moving and they expose a critical issue that's been ignored by much of the medical community for far too long, despite clear evidence of its existence. Briana's relentless campaign to raise awareness and improve the lives of TSW sufferers is nothing short of inspiring. It was an honor to sit down with her and to do my part to support this critical movement. This episode is a must listen, so settle in and join us for an important conversation that could change how you see eczema, topical steroids, and the healthcare system itself. Briana Banos, welcome to the Radical Health Rebel podcast. Thanks for coming on the show.
No, thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you here, Briana. And to kick things off, could you share a little bit about your experience growing up and particularly your experience that you had with eczema?
So, growing up, I've had it ever since I was a little girl. I remember it being in the usual spots that you would think eczema would be, with the, inside of your arms, the back of your knees. I had like little spots on my neck. I remember people would be like, "Do you have a hickey?" and things like that. So people would always, they had their little things. So it made you very self-conscious. Thinking back, it was nothing compared to what I've been through this past decade. But yeah, I had it ever since I was a young girl. I had a dermatologist here and there, I believe, but I didn't use a lot of steroids. I did use over-the-counter hydrocortisone, which is a steroid for it. But it was quite easy to manage. I just think back then, you're going through puberty, everything is huge to you and world ending. So to me, it was horrible, but it really was so small. I have friends that still don't recall that I had eczema growing up. It just wasn't on their radar. So it wasn't until I was like early 20s when it really kind of went out of control, when I started working as a performer on a cruise ship. And I just think the environment and the air and the costumes and the sweat, it just blew up. And that's kind of when my journey really started with having to deal with the severity of a skin issue. And yeah, that's when the heavy steroid use started, the Protopic started. I was on a slew of medication. I think it was 7 prescriptions
Wow.
at one time of antihistamines and antifungal and antibiotic, the steroid, the Protopic, and I was just slathering stuff on and taking so many pills. And when I would come off of them, I would go back and I would flare worse. And it was just this merry-go-round of having to be married to these drugs in order for my skin to kind of be okay. And then I wouldn't be able to swim, and I'd be afraid to do certain things. And it just wasn't my nature. I was very adventurous. I was very, I wanted just to be able to go off and do whatever I wanted at a whim. And with eczema, a lot of things have to be put into your thought process of the day, especially when it's not great. So when people think, oh, it's just a skin condition, no, it affects everything. From the moment you wake up, you wake up and you're like, okay, what spots are there? Where am I itchy? What clothes should I wear today? What, cream is going to help today? If you're traveling somewhere, do I need to take something? Do I need to bring an extra pair of clothes in case I bleed on them? It's just, if friends are going out late, should I be drinking? Is that going to make things worse? So there's a lot of things that go into having a skin condition. And for me with eczema, there's just a list that you have to go through to get through the day.
Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned steroids. I just want to make it clear, you're not talking about anabolic steroids. You're talking about corticosteroids, right? Just so that people are aware, because obviously there is that confusion sometimes. I mean, when we were speaking, before we started recording, I mentioned to you that there is some level of history of eczema in my family. My sister, myself. So I didn't have it bad, but it was bad enough. I mean, I did use corticosteroid cream called Betnovate. I also used, I don't remember what it was called, but I remember it was made from petroleum. It was like a jelly kind of stuff, and it was like grease.
Yeah, an emollient to keep the moisture locked in.
Yeah, and you look like some kind of elephant man when you put that stuff on your face.
Very shiny.
And luckily for me, I only had it for a short period of time, but my sister did suffer much longer than me. And, I can remember quite often she'd be scratching, and, my dad would always be getting annoyed with her, stop scratching, as if that's going to help.
No.
And I used to explain it to him. I said, Dad, it's like saying to heroin addicts, don't take heroin, right? You shouldn't be doing it, but you can't help yourself. You just have to scratch, right?
Well, I mean, sometimes I even go the longer. I know this is maybe a funny way of looking at it, but it's kind of like if you're in the middle of having sex and someone says, all right, stop. And you're like, why? Like when I'm scratching, like we talk about like this bone deep itch, and it's just like, I can't stop. Like it's just something I have to do. And so to tell someone to stop doing that, you're like, I can't. Like I need to scratch it.
Yeah, it is pretty awful. I mean, the other thing that I remember as well, again as a young child. So there was a friend who lived really close to me. He was a year younger than me, and from my earliest memories of knowing him, he had head to toe eczema, and he was just like one big scab, and his poor mum just didn't know what to do. Even as a 5-year-old, I could tell his mum was struggling to know what to do with him. And she'd do things like put boxing gloves on him at night so that he wouldn't scratch himself. But then you just get the laces and you scratch yourself with the laces of the gloves, But, I saw him go through some horrible times, like we'd be playing football and all of a sudden all his skin would just split open,
It's just awful.
Yeah, it was pretty awful. But, it sounds to me like Well, that sounds to me, it was a case of, you were going through that, and, the people that you were going to for help didn't really know how to help you. They thought they were doing their best because they were trying to alleviate the symptoms, when really the only way to deal with anything like that is to find out what the root cause of the issue is and deal with it at that level.
For anyone with eczema, especially, so I have experienced topical steroid withdrawal, which is basically anyone, we don't know the prevalence of it, so I can't tell you who will go through that and who won't. But people that tend to be on chronic use of hydrocortisone, or like you use Bentavate, there's different potencies of steroids that people don't realize strengths, and especially younger children, if you're using even just for a small amount of time, you could potentially, they're trying to move away from the word addiction or dependency, but we still don't understand the mechanism of how it's working in our body. But you go through this horrific withdrawal, and there's people that are long haulers like myself, where it just completely destroys your system. Like you said, you become this like scab, you have oozing and crusting, and people lose their jobs and their relationships. And it's just this awful thing. And then, like you said, the parent didn't know what to do. So it touches other people's lives as well. And if only doctors can look at the whole, which I can't also, just poo-poo on doctors that, they're horrible and they want us to suffer. It's just that's what they're taught. We're compartmentalized into small specialties, and that's what they look at. But to really look at someone as a whole and figure out what's going on before you just start throwing whatever you think might work at it, it just feels so much more helpful for people. And I think a lot of people would have less suffering if we could just focus on getting to the root of a problem and taking it out from there, as opposed to putting paint on like a rusty car,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, one thing I want to go back to, actually. So, and again, I experienced this with, and she doesn't mind me talking about this because I've spoken to her about it before. I've spoken about her on previous podcasts as well. My niece suffered really badly with, very, very severe eczema. And as you were alluding to, it creates so much stress around everything in your life, right? But then the double-edged sword is that, one thing we know about stress is that it creates an imbalance of gut microbes, and it also causes what's called a leaky gut. So things that are in the gut can escape into the bloodstream that shouldn't really, which then can affect the skin, and now you've got a vicious cycle. And the other thing that's interesting is that cortisone, or corticosteroids, create a stress response, right? So, yeah, absolutely. So, it's no surprise that there is this withdrawal, because, we've got something called the HPA axis, the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis. Now, if you're providing your body with exogenous cortisone / cortisol, your hypothalamus and pituitary are like, what the hell is going on now? So soon as you take that away from someone, of course, the body's going to be all over the place, right?
Yep. Basically, they allude to it as being, that's why they call it dependency, or it's like our body's like, well, if you're giving it to me externally, why am I going to make it? Why am I going to produce this? So taking it away, your body's like, what?
Yeah. And then, trying to get the body back into balance after all these feedback loops have been manipulated. I can imagine. I mean, I know luckily I didn't go through topical steroid withdrawal. I would imagine there was a degree of that in my niece's experience. I'm pretty sure that's the case. What was it? I know you said when you were much younger, I guess you had eczema, but it sounds to me like the symptoms were quite well controlled. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, I don't ever recall it being unmanageable. It wasn't something that I was out of control of,
Mm,
nor my mother. Like
mm,
I've interviewed so many people for I created a documentary back in 2019 called Preventable, and I got to interview so many people, so many wonderful people about their topical steroid withdrawal experience. And about 90% of us, I believe they did a survey. ITSAN, which is our organization, our nonprofit, did a survey where I believe 90% of our camp of how you come into topical steroid withdrawal is from the eczema community, because
mm,
so many of us use topical steroids as a way to mitigate our symptoms.
mm,
And yeah, like their stories did not compare to mine. They're talking about, the like putting boxing gloves
mm,
on and to stop from someone like scratching, or wrapping them up in certain bandages, or having towels on their couches because they're so greased up, and their
mm,
parents don't want all the grease to ruin furniture. Like these are things that people have to live with and go through and manage, that
mm,
no everyday person would ever even think about.
mm,
And these are, children and teens, and they're talking about all their stories. And I'm like, wow, I never experienced anything like that with my eczema growing up. But
mm.
there are some horror stories of
Yeah,
just having to manage their skin.
yeah, yeah. And again, we kind of touched on this before we started recording, but you know, for some people with severe eczema or topical steroid withdrawal, it massively affects their mental health to the degree where they're considering suicide.
Yeah. So sadly, there's someone in our group that a lot of people knew, and it was very, very sad, that committed suicide. I don't want to give the family or anything
Mm,
away, but it was about 2 years ago now. Yeah, about 2 years ago.
mm,
And I mean, that's just a known one, but the mental aspect, just because that stress
mm,
can cause such an imbalance in your body, and having to constantly deal with chronic pain and a chronic issue. I was just reading, I don't know if you know who Matthew Hesse is, but I was reading a book that he just recently wrote and published, and he was talking about dealing with tinnitus.
mhm,
I actually have tinnitus as well.
mm,
And he was saying just dealing with that and dealing with hope. And you would try all these different things and hope that it will help. And so you get yourself all like
mm,
jazzed up, and then you do this thing, and it could be the strangest thing in the world, but you're desperate, and you'll try anything
yeah,
to help the pain go away, and then it doesn't work, and you feel really disappointed. And
mm,
just that like boxing match of having to get back in the ring and try all of these things, changing your diet. What diet do you do? What tests do you pay for? What nutritionist do you go to? What mental, therapy do you end up trying to do while you're doing all these things, because it's driving you crazy?
mm,
And it affects the way you feel about yourself, your
mm,
self-confidence. As a single woman, I know what that feels like, to just put yourself out there and go on a date, and then you're feeling okay, and then the next day you have a massive flare. Like that actually happened to me this
mm,
past year. And it's just like, what do you do? And then you have to sit there and try and tell this person, well, I have this skin condition, and it's now you can't touch me, and now you can't kiss me, and now it's so awful for your mental health, because you're just trying to basically survive some
mm,
days. So I think people don't understand the mental exhaustion and
mm,
toll that it takes to just get up and be a part of the world, and then have someone, maybe not intentionally, not out of any kind of malicious intent behind it, but people love to comment
mm.
on skin.
Yeah,
And I have I have had days where I will stare in the mirror for an hour and pick at myself and put this on and that on and just hype myself up, right? I'm going out into the world, and then have someone in the house look at me and go, "You are so brave." As if, okay, that was just kind of a backhanded way to say, wow, you look really awful, but go you for going out into the world. Like, what am I supposed to do? Am I some like villain that just is going to hide away in their cave? Like, it's awful. So I really wish there would be a normalization of people have skin conditions and it's okay, because going out in the world is scary when you have that. And just those little comments make you think, all right, the entire world now when I go out is just staring at me because I look a certain way. So that's just the ball that we have to deal with, of the mental aspects that go in with having a skin condition. Yeah, absolutely. And, I know that only too well myself. And, and again, I've seen it close hand, other family members as well. I want to go back to something, and we might come back to talk about mental health again, but I just want to go back to something because this is a really important point. So, you went through your childhood where you had eczema, but you controlled the symptoms. So it didn't really kind of affect you too much as a child. Now, that I think to most people would sound like a positive thing, right? And in one way it is. But this is where I really try and help educate people, is that when you suppress symptoms, what you're really doing is you're kicking the can down the road. You're kind of asking for trouble. And, what I say to people is, when you have a symptom, and it doesn't matter what the symptom is, it could be eczema, it could be acne, it could be psoriasis, it could be bloating and gas, it could be lower back pain, whatever it might be, it's your subconscious mind saying to your conscious mind, there's an issue and it needs to be addressed. And as we alluded to earlier, it needs to be addressed at the root cause level. So if we go down that route of, let's suppress the symptoms, and it generally is the easier choice, right? So it's easier to implement. It doesn't take all the investigative work of finding out what the root cause of the issue is. But I guess my message is, it's a dangerous game to play, because like you experienced, you got into your 20s and all of a sudden it blew up, right? Correct.
Whereas, sorry, I'll just say one more thing. If when you first started getting eczema, you were able to go to someone who could help you find the root cause, you could have dealt with it right there and then. And then when you got to your 20s, it would never have arisen because you'd already dealt with the root cause.
I'd like to introduce you to Jill. Jill was a holistic lifestyle coach and Pilates instructor who had been struggling with eczema for her entire life. Despite following a healthy diet and lifestyle, her eczema had spread all over her body, leaving her frustrated and self-conscious. After thorough testing, we discovered that Jill had a parasite infection, leaky gut syndrome, and toxic overload. With a customized diet plan and a protocol to heal her gut and balance her gut microbiome, Jill started to see incredible results. In just a short amount of time, Jill's skin cleared up and she experienced a newfound sense of confidence and self-esteem. Thanks to the support she received, Jill was more able to socialize, feel more confident in her work, and ultimately live a happier and healthier life. If you're struggling with eczema, don't wait any longer. Seek the help that you need and start living your best life today. Contact me today and see how I can help you on your journey to great skin, because everyone deserves to feel their best, just like Jill. If you'd like to transform your skin like Jill did, request a consultation with me at www.bodycheck.co.uk/consultation. Now, back to the podcast.
Well, I will say it's a slightly separate experience. So when I say manage the symptoms, I wasn't really using anything to suppress it when I was younger. It was just, it was manageable with like lotions. Like it wasn't
Yeah.
something that needed investigation, I would say, back then. When I hit my 20s, what I think had happened if someone had investigated it would have helped eradicate the circus that ensued after, which was because I had sensitive skin, which never really bothered me much. I wasn't on any kind of like extreme medications or anything like that. When I joined and worked on a cruise ship, I believe I caught a fungal infection.
Yeah.
And instead of looking into that and just helping with that and possibly, going on a better diet for being on the ship, because the food isn't like wonderful that we're fed. And it certainly wasn't food that I was used to eating every day. I think things would have been very different if my skin had just been swabbed or looked at and said, hey, all right, we need to give you XYZ. Let's kick this out and let's get you on a better regimen and you're good to go. As opposed to the derm that I went to, saw that I was in pain. Again, I don't think there was any malintent. I think she was doing what she thought was best. And just looked at me and wanted to console me and was like, I know exactly what you need. And just gave me the kitchen's, like everything in the kitchen sink. Because I think she was just firing at every possible thing that could be wrong. And I was just on that. And that's where the danger is, because I was just being thrown medication as opposed to, okay, what was really going on? Why did my skin blow up so badly? And then it just kind of went off from there. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's your kind of history, but I mean, how are you now? Where would you say you're at right now in terms of your eczema and the topical steroid withdrawal? Like you mentioned, you still occasionally get flare-ups.
Yeah. So a lot of people, especially I guess what we call like a veteran or a long hauler in the TSW community. January 25th will be 10 years coming up. So it's so hard to say. People are like, is it eczema still? Do you think there's still withdrawal symptoms? I wouldn't be able to tell you if it's either or. I do believe something is off from my system because I never had eczema as bad as I do now since using the steroid.
Yeah.
And Protopic. I know there's not too much research on that as well, but Protopic is an immunosuppressive cream. And I mean, I've done even genetic testing and it says I have a genetic disposition that I shouldn't be using something like that. And of course, no doctor's ever really taken me too seriously when I bring that up. They're like, oh, okay. But yeah, I still get pretty bad flares, especially just like this past month. It was 2 months ago now, almost, like time flies. But I like went on a date. I even have a picture of myself where I still get, my arms are not great. And I still have stuff on my neck. But I was doing pretty well. I had just seen a roommate that day. I have a picture with her. I looked pretty nice. I even had my arms out that day. Went on a date that night. And then the next morning, I just woke up with like my neck kind of flary. My eyes were suddenly kind of hurting. I was like, what's going on? By the end of the day, I had swollen eyes. I had like just my neck was covered. My arms were starting to go. My hands. I was like, what is happening? And I thought, am I allergic to the person? But I don't think it was that. It was just like my body decided, all right, we're having a flare. And it lasted for a month and it was very severe. I had swollen eyes. I was fighting with my doctor to try and figure out what is happening. I needed some sort of relief. I couldn't work. It was debilitating. It burned. I didn't want to stare at the computer and I needed to edit film. And with swollen eyes. That's really difficult. Super itchy. I had oozing spots. So I still very much go through the up and down. Even right now, you can't really see it on the screen, but I purposely didn't put any makeup or anything on my neck because I have spots here. My mouth still gets it. My arms still get it. My hands still have it. I know it's really hard to see in this camera, but I'm like flaking off in my arms right now, my hands. I still very much deal with it. And topical steroids are off the table. Immunosuppressant creams are off the table. Can't use those. And I've been really trying. I just did like a gut test. We're waiting for the results. So it's still an uphill battle of trying to figure out what is best for me in this moment to do about my skin.
Yeah. I'm guessing, would I be right in saying that you're much better than you have been in the past?
Well, with anything with TSW, the beginning is usually the worst. My hair fell out. I was bald. I was a tomato from head to toe. I was just oozing everywhere. I had insomnia. I had swollen lymph nodes. My blood pressure was low at one point. My hormones were everywhere. I remember my estrogen was just all over. You seem allergic to everything. Your IgE is usually through the roof on any of your bloods. It was awful. Like the hair loss itself, you have like gender dysphoria. Like I just didn't feel like a girl. I couldn't wear any like makeup. I couldn't do anything nice with my hair. I couldn't wear nice clothing. That stuff was really difficult. I lost my marriage. I lost my job. Like back then it was really bad. But and that was in 2015, 2016, 2017 was when it was the worst. But in 2021, I have had hip dysplasia in my left hip, and I'd had a torn labrum. My doctor was like, we've got to do like massive, hip surgery to put your hip back into a place that's better so you don't keep tearing your labrum. Those surgeries took my body back into what felt like the beginning of TSW. I started like losing bits of hair. My face was so flared. My arms were so flared. I couldn't walk because my hip was broken. It was awful. And getting hit, I think anyone with a chronic condition, and maybe you would agree, it's actually the mental toll that starts to really hit down the line of you're just like, I'm exhausted. I'm so tired and I don't know what to do anymore. And you just start spiraling. And so I remember that was probably the lowest mental point, because at the beginning you have this hope. People are telling you it's going to get better and you have all this support. And when you just keep getting hit after hit after hit, less people are there immediately for that. Because they're like, it almost becomes, sadly, you're normal. That's what people think. Like, oh, she can deal with that. And it just becomes a really lonely place of like, how much more can I take? It's just someone shoving your head in the water and pulling you back up and shoving you in the water and pulling you back up. There's only so much someone can take of that. So it's torture. And I think a lot of us, I know I do, I'm trying to work on it, is like, I have that fear in the back of my head. Like, I just never know when I'm going to flare again. So like, what is, am I going to eat something tonight that's going to do it? Am I going to touch something? Am I going to interact with someone or something? So that fear is always nagging in the back of your mind of be careful what you do. And you just become a smaller version of yourself, because it's like you see these landmines that might be there. And so you're just tiptoeing around and you don't know if your foot is going to land on one.
Yeah. And that anxiety that you're experiencing of what might happen creates more stress, which makes you more likely to flare. and then you're back on that merry-go-round again, which, yeah, I mean, again, I've seen it close up. It's not pleasant. So in your early 20s, you started getting eczema. Was it pretty soon after you were kind of, after it got worse, that you were put straight onto the steroids?
It was a couple months because I remember it was starting to get bad. And because I was living on a cruise ship, it's really hard for me to get a derm appointment. And our ship went into a dry dock, which means we were able to sign off because the ship was having maintenance stuff done. And that was probably about 3 months into it, I believe, of me having like the really big issues. So not too long after, but it was probably about 3-ish months before I was able to see someone about it.
Yeah. And what was the results of using that? Did it kind of calm down the eczema to a degree?
Hey there, Rebels. I have got something very special to share with you today. Did you know that every month I release an exclusive No Punches Pulled episode? These are conversations you won't hear anywhere else with incredible, sometimes controversial guests who expose hidden truths, challenge corruption, and bring you to actionable steps to take charge of your health in a world where censorship and restrictions are on the rise. These subscriber-only episodes go deep, and for the price of a single takeaway coffee each month, you can become a paid subscriber to access this extra content, the kind of content certain authorities would rather you didn't hear. By subscribing, you're not just supporting the Radical Health Rebel podcast, you're helping bring even bolder, more controversial, and inspiring guests onto the show. You'll also be making an investment in real health, real truth, and real solutions, so much more meaningful than what you get with TV licenses, cable subscriptions, or film streaming giants. If you're ready to support this movement for health and truth, head to the show notes and click Support the Show.
It takes just a moment, so why not do it right now?
Then come back and enjoy the rest of this episode. Thank you for listening, subscribing, and for rebelling with us against the mainstream. Let's create a healthier, happier, and fairer world together. Go to the show notes, click Support the Show, and let's keep the Radical Health Rebel movement growing strong.
Oh yeah, I mean, I was on 2 different antihistamines, Protopic, a topical steroid, an antifungal oral, and an antibiotic oral. Like, you best believe, like, it was just kicking everything in my system. And of course, if you've ever used a topical steroid, it's sort of like magic. It takes it all away so quickly. And so even within, I think, a week, maybe 2 weeks of being on all of that, I look like it helped so much. I remember my dance captain said, "Oh, you have your cheetah spots," because I was having hyperpigmentation from where all the spots were, which is why I feel it was fungal, because it looked fungal. And so I had these hyperpigmentation spots, which I didn't care about at all. I was like, I feel great. I'm not itchy. I'm able to sleep. I don't have patches all over me now. So to me, it was like happy as a clam with all that, even if I had to take all that stuff.
Yeah. And how long did that, let's call it, honeymoon period last?
I had to go on that concoction a few times. So I would use those things. I left the cruise ship, had my vacation, kind of got off of it. Skin was still not great. And then I would go back onto the cruise ship, that environment again with the sweaty costumes and things, start flaring again, go back on all of that stuff. But then I started having skin issues in areas that I didn't before. And that's kind of like where I think the real danger starts, because one of the symptoms of topical steroid withdrawal is you start getting eczema in other spots that you didn't before. But back then I don't know anything about this. So I'm on this concoction and I leave the cruise ship again, and then I'm having to use it even after the cruise ship. And then I went back on my last contract before I got really ill, and they put me on cyclosporin, which is an oral immunosuppressant. You have to have bloods done for and things like that. And at that time, living on a cruise ship, trying to get your bloods done and everything wasn't a very easy thing. And then it was killing my kidneys. So now I'm killing my kidneys for a skin issue. And I remember not feeling great about it. I didn't see that it was helping very much, but it became like my normal to not have great skin anymore. And I'm still on these drugs. I think the longest stint I did of an antibiotic oral was 6 months, which is nuts to me. That's such a long time to be an antibiotic.
Yeah.
And so that was probably on and off for 3 years, all of that concoction of coming off of it, but your skin's not great, it needs to go back on. And by the time I came off of it was after my wedding in September of 2014. I remember my mother just being like, maybe you just need a break from all this stuff, because my skin was just not happy. And I think she thought maybe a reset for me. And I kind of agreed. I was like, yeah, let's get off on this stuff. And as soon as I tried to get off of it, it was just like a bloom of red rash all over my back, near my pelvic area, around my wrist. And then my eyes would start swelling. And we just didn't know what was happening. And at first we thought I was allergic to something maybe. And I did the deep dive and, went to Google, which is a big no-no in the medical world of Google. What is Google? And I remember going to my GP and she was like, oh my gosh, let's get this. I'd had her since I was a little girl, she just wanted to see me feel better, gave me a steroid shot, and then put me on oral steroids for a taper. That helped so much. But then as soon as I started to taper off of that, blew up again. And that's when I found someone online with topical steroid withdrawal, or what they called red skin syndrome. And I was like, I look just like her. And she has all these symptoms that I'm having. And back then in 2014, it was so unknown. And trying to bring it up to a doctor, because I went back to the emergency room with our urgent care back in the States, like A&E. And the guy was just like, I don't know what this is. I don't think that's your problem. So he gave me another oral pack of steroids. And he's like, take it, don't take it. It's up to you. And I remember telling myself, we were like my ex-husband back then, we were about to move. And I remember expressing to him, I'm going to take this steroid pack so that we can move. I said, but if I have these symptoms come back again, I'm not touching a steroid. Like, I believe this is my issue. And that's what happened. It was January 25th of 2015. I got off of that steroid taper and I didn't touch a steroid again. And my body just blew up.
Yeah. So what did you do next?
For the first, I think it was not even 2 months, I was feeling hopeful that whatever research I pulled off the internet, I had found Eczema, which is the International Topical Steroid Awareness Network. Back then it was Addiction Awareness Network. And I tried to get any sort of resources off of them, off of what I found online. And I went to a derm up where I had moved, and that was my old university town. And there was a teaching hospital. There's something, okay, fresh people, they're going to be curious. Not the case. They barely wrote down my history correctly. and then just told me, oh, you're going to need probably another steroid shot or some sort of immunosuppressant and things like that. And I was like, no one's listening to me. I mean, my hair was falling out. I was like, oh, it's just severe eczema. And I was like, what are you talking about? And I just became, gosh, really downtrodden. And I was like, I can't even go to the people that I thought I should be able to go to for support. And so I just kind of leaned into what small community there was back then in a Facebook group and just kind of went off of, okay, guys, what are you doing? Like I was using napkins to help with my oozing. And they're like, no, girl, let's get you some like bandages. Let's get you, some visco paste, some zinc. And I was just using bandages, soaking in Epsom salt baths back then, Dead Sea salt baths, apple cider vinegar baths, bleach baths, like just anything, all sorts of different oils, coconut, oh God, the coconut oil, and just trying to survive off of the help of other people. And I'm definitely not someone who will sit on a couch and just boohoo myself. At first I was, and thank goodness I got out of that quickly. Because I was like, this cannot be my life anymore. Like, this is not happening. And that's when I began also advocating. And I feel like that was a form of control for myself and to hopefully help other people. I had started a YouTube channel. I was trying to educate as much as I could, myself and others. And that's when the whole idea of doing a documentary kind of came around so that I could interview other people and doctors. I really wanted to be able to tread that line of, okay, who is out there helping us, who is trying to research this, who has a sympathetic, compassionate ear, who is still curious. A lot of older doctors just were really steadfast in their thinking, which is crazy to me because science is ever changing. And yeah, I kind of just wanted to find the answers or be a part of the solution. So I did what I could with the community. I listened to them to try and see what helped their skin, what didn't. That was the support that I got back then. Because really in the pharmaceutical world or like the Western doctor world, there really wasn't anything other than topical steroids and then some immunosuppressants that they could give you back then. And dupilumab was really new, which is a biologic drug that a lot of atopic dermatitis people and some other skin conditions can take to help with the symptoms. But back then I was very wary of it. It was extremely new. The trials were just being concluded. And I hadn't really gone down the route of seeing a naturopath or anything like that. I had tried paleo, like I tried clearing out my own diet. It really wasn't helping very much. I had cut out caffeine. I cut out alcohol for a long time. And I was just doing the best that I could with what I had at that time.
So you mentioned a naturopath. Is that a route that you have gone down since?
Imagine being able to finally say goodbye to the constant itchiness, discomfort, and embarrassment of eczema. Meet Lissa, a 25-year-old accounts manager who struggled with her lifelong eczema until she found a solution that changed her life. Lissa reached out to me feeling skeptical after countless failed attempts to find relief. But with a personalized diet and lifestyle plan tailored to her individual needs, we were able to identify and treat an underlying fungal infection that had been exacerbating her eczema. Lissa's eczema not only cleared up, but she also unexpectedly experienced relief from headaches and a dramatic improvement in her asthma. And as her skin healed, so did her confidence, leading to a newfound sense of self-assurance and empowerment. If you're tired of feeling uncomfortable in your own skin and want to experience the same life-changing results as Lissa, take the next step towards clear, healthy skin. Schedule a consultation with me today at www.bodycheck.co.uk/consultation and take the first step towards a happier, healthier you. Don't let eczema control your life any longer. Take charge of your health and unlock the confidence and freedom you deserve. Your journey to great skin starts now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So again, with the kind of going in the ring and getting knocked out and then going back to the ring, I've tried a bunch of different things and I'm still trying to lean into it because I still don't want to just quote unquote give up and throw a white flag and just be like, whatever. I have seen two different, like, I guess you would call, one was I'm trying to get the right titles, but it was just two different naturopaths. And I've also done Chinese therapy. I did that for a bit. Very expensive, which is why I just couldn't keep going. I did it for about 5 months and I just wasn't seeing any results from it at all, to just be like, okay, Bree, clear out your bank account, keep going. I've done stem cell therapy. Oh my gosh, what else have I done? Just different pills and diets. I did try medical medium for a little while. Did like the celery juice in the morning and everything. And I will say, I think that helped, but keeping that up, like I became very almost antisocial because I was making everything and doing everything because it's like raw foods. And if I cooked anything, I wanted to make sure it was completely clear ingredients. And so sometimes I would spend almost my entire Sunday meal prepping. So I wasn't really doing much like socially. But I will say there is something with the gut, which is why I just did another gut test. Like I want to make sure that when I'm working with a nutritionist that I'm doing what's right, not just guessing. So yeah, I've gone down different routes. I even tried, was it bicarbonate soda? Like you take it to try and help with your gut. And I don't know, man. I've tried a lot of things over the decade to see what can be done. I've tried dupilumab. I even tried that. That's not natural, but I tried that as well. And that actually really helped. And I was trying to work on my gut stuff while I was using that. But then I had the awful symptoms that came a year later with the eye issues and stuff. And it was just too bad. I had to withdraw from the drug.
Yeah. I mean, your journey doesn't sound too dissimilar from my niece's, actually. And she, I helped her to a degree, but, as a family member, I wasn't the right person to help her. And she saw other people and they did really help her. Now, what I would say, what I've seen in my experience, so I've been in practice 28 years, and it doesn't cease to amaze me what miracles I see happen in people, from, the worst situation to, getting back to what you would probably consider optimal health. And it's sometimes it can actually be getting the basics right. Now, I don't mean to disrespect anyone by saying that, but if you took someone and put them as part of a hunter-gatherer tribe, living in nature as humans were intended to live, I think most people's illnesses would just go away.
Yeah, I agree with that one.
So it is very, I guess my message is for anyone suffering from eczema, TSW, there is light at the end of the tunnel, and there is a way. And I just think just keep hold of the hope, I think is a really important message, because there are people out there that can help you. And I would say, and just keep going. I know people put a lot of effort in and haven't always got the result they wanted, but just be aware that the answer is out there somewhere. If you haven't found it yet, keep looking.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the documentary. What was the real, I guess, motivation for you? Why did you make the documentary?
Well, back then, even now, but back then specifically, we just weren't on the map. And I would see so many people write into the private Facebook group saying, oh, I went to my doctor. I was telling them about my symptoms. They're like, oh, you're just this one-off person. Like that, this withdrawal or this, syndrome isn't a thing. You're just a one-off. And I would just see all these one-off people. I'm like, we're not one-off. Like, look at us all together. We are not one-off. So I remember expressing really wanting to get a bunch of stories together. I didn't want it to be just anecdotal because I was like, no doctor is going to listen to this. So I really was trying to create trust in myself, especially with my YouTube channel. I wanted doctors to feel that they could talk to me and be safe about that. So I not only wanted to start gathering stories, but I wanted to gather medical professionals who were willing to talk to me about this. And some people are like, oh, well, why don't you just do Zooms? Why don't you just do this or that? And I was like, no, like I want to go all or nothing in this. So I remember, oh goodness, I created an LLC, I created a website, I had created an Instagram, which is what I use now for this platform. And just started putting a call out of like, hey, I'm taking donations. I've had my YouTube channel for over a year, so people kind of knew who I was and just kind of banked on that. And I remember, honestly, I think what got me through a lot of it was like that kind of ostrich stick your head in a hole, because I was going through a divorce as soon as I tried to start raising money and everything. And it was like, my lifeline of everything was falling apart in my life. I was like, this couldn't fall apart. And I just really wanted a space that, one, held all our stories, so you can't say that we're one-off, that had research be a part of it, that had doctors' voices talking about it. I just didn't want to be negated. And I was like, I wanted something different for us. And so to me, a documentary was the best way to put that all together. I have no film training before then. Like I picked up a camera. I love documenting my life. But I didn't have any formal training. I just YouTube University, a lot of stuff. I asked a couple friends who did film, in their either spare time or just kind of on the side, and went from there. And just, I hate using like fake it till you make it, but that's what I did. I did as much as training, quote unquote, as I could before I took off, and I circumnavigated the globe and collected all these stories and edited it all together and then put it up on YouTube, praying that, it would make some sort of difference. I remember being so nervous about it. I broke out in full body hives when I put it out. Again, the mind is a powerful thing. And yeah, the comments I still get about Preventable, that's what the documentary is called, is so touching. But what makes me sad about it is people were seeming to find it after the fact, that they were already in like trouble. And that's kind of what spurred this second documentary that I actually have coming out very soon, called Still Preventable, where I interviewed more patients and more doctors. And I even had sponsors now this time because of the first documentary. And I really wanted to push harder on this, that this still shouldn't be a thing that we're fighting against, this uphill battle, that people are finding my first documentary because they're already in trouble. Like, I want the second documentary to go out to the eczema community, to the skin community. I don't want them to go through TSW. I want them to recognize the symptoms. I want them to be able to understand and be educated, to know that there are other paths they can take to help with their health. So I want people to know that they can be in control as much as they can be, and to use their voice and to make their lives better instead of just leaning on this one specific drug that can really have horrible repercussions if used chronically. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I have to say, I was going to ask you what your experience was as a filmmaker, and it amazes me that you had no experience, because when I watched that documentary, it just looks like any other professional documentary.
Oh, thank you.
It doesn't look like someone that's, oh, let me do a documentary. Can I raise some money? Oh, okay, let's go. Which is basically what happened.
Yeah.
It is a really, really good documentary. I watched it, and that's why I reached out to you. And I was like, right, I need to speak to you. I need to get you on my podcast and let more people know about this documentary, because it's just so good. I guess as well, you're obviously, you put that together to reach out to people to help prevent other people going through the same issue. But as you alluded to earlier, I guess it's also for medical professionals as well, right?
Correct. I really, with the first one and especially the second one, I want it to be taken seriously. I want any healthcare professional, honestly, to just stay curious, to be open-minded. Hopefully that they're hearing it come from the mouth of a colleague as opposed to, a patient, will help them see like this isn't Santa Claus. This isn't something that is just make believe. This is a thing, and they have people in their fields trying to figure this out. And if they would take it a little more seriously, or just be compassionate towards a patient, if they are telling you, I think I have these symptoms, don't just push them off and be like, oh, just here, either take this immunosuppressant or get out of my office, which is what happens sometimes.
Yeah.
And so I really, my dream, I've actually put in for a fund and I got rejected. I'm not going to stop, but I would love to be able to create something for medical students. Just even if it's a workshop, just something small about topical steroid withdrawal. Because if a GP is the person that you're going to see most likely to prescribe you a topical steroid, they have basically zero training on how to use it, the strengths, how it works in your system, just to give them a heads up of, hey, this is a thing. It's still being researched, but these are the symptoms. Probably lay off the topical steroid if your patient has XYZ. It would be so nice and to work with another medical professional to put this together. Would be a dream. I do have someone that's here in the UK that's happy to do it once I have any kind of funding. I mean, he's happy to do it for free, but I'm like, I need to, pay my bills.
Yeah.
So that would be a dream, to be able to be a part of this next generation stepping up into the medical field, to know about this so that it's not always the patient having to work themselves up to be like, all right, I'm going to an appointment today. Let me bring my research. Let me bring all this stuff, to then just be shot down. It should be the other way around. They should come in, maybe even not knowing what TSW is, and the doctor should be the one like, oh, I think you might be experiencing this, or I'm afraid that you're going to start experiencing this. Let's take you off of the steroid because we don't want to go down that route. That would be a dream. That would be the dream.
Yeah. That would be amazing. The challenge we have now with modern medicine, sadly, is that medical doctors are no longer being able to be doctors.
No.
What I mean by that is they are becoming algorithm followers. And if they don't follow the algorithm, they get into trouble. And the likelihood is their medical license will be taken away.
Yeah.
Right.
I had a doctor, even just here, I was trying to show her some research, even about it's like a low dose antibiotic. It kind of helped someone in the US, and I was showing her the research. about it, that this could be a possible route for TSW people or something. And she was like, even if I wanted to put you maybe on this regimen, she goes, I could have my license taken away. She goes, this is not how we do it here. It's off like script for them. So she was like, can't do this. Like, it's either they follow XYZ and that's it. Like, there's no wiggle room for anything. And not that to say that the research that I had would do anything, but it was just the fact of knowing she's like, my hands are tied. I can only do XYZ and that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, going back to what I was mentioning earlier, when you've got any symptom, you've kind of got two choices. You can treat the symptom, or you can try and find the root cause and try and reverse the root cause. Now, sadly, medical doctors only have one option, which is to treat the symptoms.
Yeah.
So, as someone suffering from something like eczema, TSW, I guess you've got a choice. You can see a medical doctor, or you could see someone who's a bit more naturally based. So whether it's nutritional therapist, naturopath, functional medicine practitioner. But again, I think it's important to find someone that perhaps has experience in that area. Now, obviously, TSW, probably not many people have any experience of TSW. I mean, there's a lot of people out there that do have experience helping with eczema. But again, I'll go back to kind of what I was saying earlier. When you give the human body what it needs and you give it enough time, the body's amazing at healing itself. And, and I've had multiple people come to me over the years and they'll say, I've got this condition and my doctor said there's nothing you can do about it. What do you think? And I generally say, well, look, what I can guarantee you is I can help you get as healthy as you can possibly be. Right. And my view is health and disease can't live in the same body. So if you optimize your health, you can't have disease. Now, there are some things that might be irreversible. Like, if you have no meniscus in your knee, living your best life isn't going to recreate a meniscus. Maybe there's some stem cell therapy, etc., that might be able to help with that. But in most situations, certainly my experience, the last 28 years, if you give the body what it needs and you avoid things that are damaging your body, and there's a lot of those around in our environment, sadly, then, amazing things can happen.
No, I agree. I will say, as a patient, I know this throws a wrench in some of that. When, even here in Scotland, where I'm based at the moment, you get free prescriptions and things like that. When it comes to having to seek it out yourself, I know a lot of people, a survey was just put out by an eczema charity here. Just what is the financial burden of having a skin condition? And it's having to go these other routes, which are the way to go. But man, things are costly. And I know for families, it can feel like such a burden. And it's breaking that down, though. I remember a doctor was stating, hey, it might feel more costly in the beginning, but think about the horrors that you're saving yourself down the line. So that's something I really try and think about with my own health as well, when I'm paying for a gut test or when I'm about to go pay for, a therapist. Yeah, these are upfront costs, but hopefully when you find the right fit, this will help in the long term. And that's, I think, the takeaway is it might be a lot of upfront costs, but in the end, it's saving you so much hardship and possibly so much more money down the line. If you can just get to this root cause and just find what works for you.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, again, if I look back at my own history, and this is something that I went through and calculated. So in the 18 years that I had acne, Now, in England, we do pay for prescriptions, so it's different. It's different to Scotland, and obviously, and I don't know about now, but back then they were heavily subsidised as well. So we were still getting them, probably about 100 times cheaper than you would pay in the US for the same prescription. I paid the equivalent of around £6,000 for medications and topicals that didn't work, right? And made me a lot worse. And, if you go and work with someone, it's almost certainly going to cost you less than that to get to the root cause of the problem and be able to heal yourself.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, there's probably some people out there that probably might charge more than that, but if you look at it, it's probably still worth it, right? Because if you can get your life back, and one of the things that, again, regardless of the condition, but I would say particularly eczema and TSW, is that what you get back is freedom.
Yeah.
Because when you've got a condition like that, you are a slave to that condition. And as you've described, right, you've got to think about so many things, and you're not sleeping at night. And, it's just worry, anxiety 24/7. So you're a slave to that. So how much value would you put into getting your freedom back from that condition?
It's priceless.
Right. And, what I would potentially suggest, if someone's suffering and they're thinking, well, okay, that's quite a lot of money to invest, then perhaps do a deal with someone and say, look, I'm willing to invest and I'm willing to do what you advise me to do. But if by a certain period of time this hasn't been achieved, then, would you be willing to give me a money back guarantee? Right? Because then the practitioner is going to have to put their money where their mouth
is. Yeah.
So then there's no risk. But obviously, there is a slight downside to that. If you look at it from a psychological point of view, is that it does perhaps give you less skin in the game, right? So if you kind of think, oh, well, I've been suggested I do this, but if I don't do it, well, I can just get my money back, right? So there is a bit of a trade-off in that respect, because, let's say, you spend a few £1,000s, a few $1,000s, depending on how wealthy you are. I mean, some people, that's not worried about that. But for a lot of people, if they're struggling to pay that kind of money, they've got skin in the game. So now they've invested in themselves, they're far more likely to do the things they need to do. As humans, we naturally procrastinate and we self-sabotage, right? But again, it's good to have a practitioner that's able to have skills that can help you with those things as well.
I agree. Yeah.
So what can people do to kind of help spread the message of TSW?
Oof. So, I mean, there are resources. ITSAN, the International Topical Steroid Awareness Network, is our nonprofit. They have so many resources for anyone going through it, but to be able to spread awareness, and these are topics that I touch upon in the newest documentary, Still Preventable. In the US, we are trying to get the TSW resolution bill signed in each state. And if you can just get in touch with your rep, get in touch with the staff of your rep, just so that you can have a Zoom meeting, email. If you can see them face to face, amazing. Tell them your story, and it could be you, it could be your family member, it could be a friend that knows you, and just say, hey, this is a thing. We would love if you would sign this bill, because it gives us more credit and it gives us a foot in the door. And my mother was actually the first person to ever get the bill signed in Florida, or in the US, but it was in Florida. And we have one other person, his name is JP, and he had it signed in Maine. And man, would I love to start a campaign next year about, hey, by the end of 2025, if we could have every state have something signed, because we're everywhere. And that would be such a great initiative in the United States to have that behind us. Here in the UK, if you can be a part of any workshops, any conversation that any universities are having. I'm part of a TSW workshop that's UK wide, where we're just, trying to work together with other UK medical professionals as a patient to figure out what this is, what to call it, all this different stuff. And then if you have symptoms, write into the MHRA. There's a yellow card scheme. There's a group called Scratch That Here, that if you go to their website, they have it all laid out for you. You just need to like type it in and send it off. Share your story. I think that's the biggest thing. We have people who are like celebrity status starting to come out with this. Anthony Lexa is doing such an amazing job of sharing her story. She is an actress. She was on Sex Education from Netflix. And there's a couple musicians that have this condition. It's just using your story, putting it on your platform, and hopefully normalizing that this is a thing. This isn't something that's made up. So there are quote unquote political routes to take. They're just sharing your story, being a part of any type of surveys. I'm going to be running a half marathon soon with another TSW individual, and just things like that, raising money for the nonprofit to help, and putting out there, maybe when you're running, you have a little QR code on you and like, what is TSW? And so people can ask questions. It's just really using your talent and using whatever skill you have, even if it's the gift of the gab, like just share. Like those are ways you can help.
Yeah. What I would suggest is just, if you can make sure you send me all those links so I can put them in the show notes, that would be great. So what does the bill include in the US, the TSW bill?
It's just stating that this is an actual entity, that TSW is a real thing, that doctors should be looking out for it. And I believe it's in the bill. It like establishes our TSW day, which is February 3rd. And it just recognizes that as an actual day for this condition. So in the hopes, especially for children, and I talk about this in a tiny bit in the first documentary, Preventable, but this one's still Preventable. Parents have an extra burden of, because their child's under their care, CPS can become involved, Child Protective Services. The doctor can say, oh, it's child negligence. You're not putting the steroid on them. We're going to take your child away if you're not doing this. And it becomes very scary. And just to have this paper from your state stating, hey, this is a real thing, it's just one other tool that you can have against any defense of someone saying, oh, you're being neglectful. No, I'm not. Look at this. This is like, it's government signed. It's stating this is a thing. I have a right to not slather my child in this steroid. Like, that's not negligence. I'm just doing what I should be doing as opposed to what you think I should be doing.
Yeah.
So having that piece of paper, it sounds so silly, but that's just another way that we can, defend, especially parents with kids, but just to have a leg up in the system and say, hey, we have this. And it would help probably also as well get more people curious, more medical professionals, hopefully get some funding for research. We need to know prevalence. We need to know exact diagnostic criteria. Right now in the United States, Dr. Ian Miles is the first one to ever do a quantitative study, which I was lucky to be a part of, to try and figure out what's going on in our bodies. Like they did all sorts of stuff. And he found out this is a real thing separate from atopic dermatitis. Do we know everything about it? No. But this is just the start. And these are the types of things that if we can get more bills like this signed or just traction, funds will come in for that research.
Yeah, amazing. And hopefully it will stop the gaslighting of patients by doctors as well.
That would be lovely.
Yeah, which is really sad to see. And again, I've seen that close up as well, and it's so hard for people to deal with when their doctor's just denying what they're being told. So, what advice would you give someone that's going through TSW?
Oh, there's so much. I think the top one is know that you're not alone. Definitely reach out to the community. You need support. Tell your friends and family. I mean, now we have the documentary. So I have Preventable. I will have Still Preventable out very soon. There are other, there's another documentary called Skin on Fire. There's another smaller, more intimate documentary called My Life During Topical Steroid Withdrawal. Use these resources, like lean into it, learn as much as you can, just so that you have that support, and like ask for what you need. A lot of people in your family and friends, they have no idea what this is, what support you might need. So definitely ask for specifics if you can. I think another thing is to not lose hope. Like you said, it's awful. It sucks, especially so much in the beginning, and a day feels like a year. But just don't give up. Keep putting one foot in front of the other. And I would say document. Take photos. I know that there are so many people that wish they had done that, just so that they can have the proof. And I know it's not for the meek-minded, because it's hard. There's trauma in this. No one wants, I don't even like looking at pictures of it anymore. I just feel like I'm inundated with it, especially because I've been editing the film. It's very triggering. It's very hard. But if you just take the pictures and put them away and just label, okay, this was this month, and just keep it going. You don't have to look at it if you don't want to. At least you have that when you feel up to sharing your story. That's just really important, especially when you're going to a doctor's office. For you saying, oh, I had these symptoms, as opposed to showing that you had these symptoms, is very different. So I'd say document is another big one. And then, oh gosh, there's so much. I would say also just your mental health is important as much as your physical health. So if you do need to see a therapist, those things, like, it matters so much. Get that help that you need. We want you here. So I think those are kind of like the biggest ones, and just keep advocating for yourself. If you go to a doctor and they don't want to listen, as much as it's hard, just say, all right, I'm not going back to that one. Try for the next one. And then seek out actual, naturopaths, other means, that isn't just pharmaceutical routes, that can get to the root cause and things like that. And show yourself grace. Healing isn't linear, especially with TSW. There are so many ups and downs, where one day you feel like it's going in the right direction, and the next day you're back down on the floor. Just know it's a day-by-day process. And the biggest thing, actually, I tend to forget this one. Please do not compare yourself to someone else's journey. That expectation, is brutal. When you think, oh, I'm going to be better in this X amount of time, when you put that on yourself and it doesn't happen, it kills. So whatever advice you do take from others, or you see, oh, this really helped this person, or that really helped that other person, we're all different. It may not be the same for you, but just take what you can from people, but don't just sit and compare your story to someone else's.
Yeah. Some really, really great advice there. And one thing I know, when my niece was going through her experience, we had a little WhatsApp group with myself, my sister, so her auntie, and her. And I think she felt whenever she was having a low moment, she could reach out on that group, and we were always there for her. And I think from a psychological point of view, I think that was really, really important for her.
Yeah.
And so, I think when you brought that point up as well is, have people around you that, can support you. And if you don't know anyone now who you can reach out and to support to, all the links that you mentioned previously, reach out to someone, whether it's a Facebook group or whatever it might be. I mean, I know sometimes Facebook groups can be a case of, misery loves company. It can be that as well. So find the right group.
Yes, I agree with that one.
So just be careful what group you find, but I'm sure the ones that you've recommended would be ideal.
I agree with that statement. I'm not very much in the Facebook groups anymore because that's how I felt it could be sometimes. Yeah. But I think especially in the worst moments when you feel lost, they can be a bit helpful just because you're trying to find that group, and within that bigger group, you might be able to find the connection that you're looking for that one or two other people that you can, make that WhatsApp group with. Because I had a lot of support. Like both my parents were great. Like my mother moved me in to hers for a year to help take care of me. Not everybody has that, but even having that can feel really lonely because those people aren't going through it. They're not. It's really hard at the end of the day, even if someone is being a sympathetic ear or compassionate or trying to show empathy. If they're not going through it, you feel like, oh, maybe they just don't understand. So sometimes it's good to have that one or two people that you really trust in the community that you're like, man, I'm having to deal with this ooze spot today. And they're just like, I get it. I get it. So having both support just in your life in general, friends and family, but also finding those like golden nuggets from the actual community that can be there for you, and you can lean on each other when one's having a really bad day, the other can help boost them up.
Yeah, for sure. Briana, this has been a fantastic conversation with you, and I think a really important one as well. But I think I know what you're going to say for my next question, but what's next for you?
So one is my documentary coming out, still Preventable. You can find it on my YouTube soon. I have so much other stuff on my YouTube as well, from almost a decade's worth of conversation. So definitely, if you want to look at that stuff, happy to have you there. Next steps, I actually just finished a year of film school. It was more for creative work, not really on the technical side of stuff, but I just want to keep advocating. I want to stay in the health space. I would love to do like consultancy work. I want to help with this community and with the skin community in general. And I'd like to marry the arts with health and how we could use both to spread awareness, spread support. So I've been putting in for like different funds and things, either for exhibitions or workshops, or I would love to write a memoir about this one day. Just kind of any way to support the community, hopefully meetups at some point soon. Yeah, I want to find a space where I can be helpful, and continue advocating until this is prevented.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, it's interesting as you were talking then about, the direction you're looking to go in. It sounds quite similar to me in a way to Andrew Wakefield. I don't know if you know Andrew Wakefield.
That rings a bell.
Yeah, so he's made quite a lot of movies now. So he made Vaxxed and 1986, The Act, Protocol 7, which has just come out, which I'm hoping he's going to come on and talk about. But he's almost
I can imagine a good person for you to study, because, you know, he's done so well getting his message out, you know, in its health and its, you know, making documentaries. So yeah, from my point of view, he's like the original medical heretic, and but in a good way, because he's getting the truth out there. But yeah, so you remind me of Andrew Wakefield, and I couldn't almost give you a bigger compliment than that.
Oh, thank you.
My pleasure. And so where can people find you online? Where can people find your documentaries, etc.?
So my YouTube channel is just Briana Banos, and that's where both the documentaries will be. That's where a lot of different information on TSW is. I have funny videos. I have educational videos. I am Preventable _DOC on Instagram. That's where I live most of the time with any sort of information. So that's where you can find me there. And I have my website, brianabanos.com. So I do like photography and stuff on the side. I'm trying to boost that up over here once my freelance sort of visa kicks in. So I have all sorts of information on my website as well. And if you also feel led to buy me a coffee, I also have that on there in case you do watch the documentary, since obviously they're not in a cinema or anything. So if you want to support in any way, you can do that as well. Yeah, those are my main bases. And I hope that if you go on any of them, that they're helpful and that you can find a way that you can support yourself through your journey, and hopefully pave the way for the next generation to not have to deal with this. So
amazing. Yeah. And again, just make sure you send me all the links you want me to share, and I'll put them in the show notes.
Absolutely.
Briana, thank you so much. You know, it's been an amazing conversation. As I said, it's an important conversation, and, you know, I really hope, you know, this episode gets out to all the people that really need to hear it.
Amazing. Thank you so much for having me.
It's been a pleasure. So that's all from Briana and me for this week. But don't forget to join me same time, same place next week on the Radical Health Rebel podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Remember to give the show a rating and a review, and I'll see you next time.